Rain poured down the cracked streets of a forgotten town as a small boy, no older than 10, sat under a flickering streetlight, clutching a torn backpack. His clothes were soaked, his lips trembled, and his eyes, too tired for someone his age, stared at the distant glow of a diner window. His name was Ethan, and for the past 2 years the streets had been his only home. The world had turned its back on him ever since the night his mother died in a fire and his father disappeared. No one stopped to ask the boy if he was okay. No one cared. Until the night, a roar of engines shattered the silence of his loneliness. Before we dive deeper into Ethan's incredible journey, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of humanity. Stories like this remind us that compassion can come from the most unexpected places. That night, Ethan sat beside a dumpster behind a diner, shivering. His stomach ached with hunger as he watched people inside laughing over warm food. Every few minutes, he'd pull out a small photograph from his backpack, the only picture he had of his mother. "I'm trying, Mom," he whispered through chattering teeth. The rain drowned his voice, but he spoke anyway, as if saying it aloud would make her proud somehow. Then, as thunder rolled in the distance, he heard something, a low rumble growing louder by the second. At first he thought it was another storm, but then lights, dozens of them, cut through the fog. One by one, motorcycles rolled into the diner parking lot, their engines roaring like lions. The riders looked rough, with leather jackets, tattoos, and faces that spoke of hard lives. Ethan froze, clutching his backpack tighter. He'd learned to fear men like that. In his world, people who looked tough often were. But this night was different. One of the bikers noticed him. He was tall, broad, with a thick beard and a jacket patched with the words, "Guardians MC." He took off his helmet and looked. Right at Ethan. Not through him like everyone else, but at him. The man stepped closer, knelt down and said softly, "Hey, kid, you okay?" Ethan didn't answer. He wanted to run, but his legs felt heavy. The man looked at the soaked boy, his torn shoes, and the faint scars on his arms. Something in the biker's expression changed. He called out to the others, and within moments, a circle of bikers formed around Ethan, not to intimidate him, but to protect him from the rain. One of them handed over his jacket. Another gave him a sandwich from his saddlebag. The boy didn't know it yet, but this moment would change everything. They took him inside the diner, where warmth finally reached his skin. The waitress looked at the bikers with surprise, but when she saw the trembling boy, she just nodded and brought over a cup of hot cocoa. Ethan drank slowly, his hands shaking. He hadn't had a real meal in days. The leader of the bikers, who called himself Hawk, sat beside him and asked where his parents were. Ethan just whispered, "Gone." Hawk didn't press further. He just said, "Not anymore. Kid, you got us now." That night the bikers called local authorities, but when they learned that Ethan had no relatives, no guardians, and no safe place to go, Hawk made a decision that would echo through the lives of everyone in that room. "Then we'll be his family," he said. The next few weeks were a blur of hope and healing. The biker club took turns caring for Ethan, giving him a place to sleep, new clothes, and meals every day. For the first time in years, Ethan laughed. He helped in their garage, learned to polish bikes, and even got a small leather vest with his name stitched on it. They called him Little Hawk, but behind his new smile, shadows lingered. He still woke up crying some nights, haunted by the fire that took his mother and the memory of a father who had walked out and never returned. One afternoon, while helping wash the bikes, Ethan fainted. Hawk rushed him to the hospital. The doctor said Ethan had an infection that had gone untreated for too long. His body had been weakened by months of malnutrition and exposure. Hawk stayed by his side day and night, barely leaving the room. The tough biker who never cried now sat in silence, praying to a God he wasn't sure existed. When the news spread, something unbelievable happened. Within 2 days, bikers from across the state began to ride in, then from other states, hundreds of them. They gathered outside the hospital, revving their engines in unity, a roar of brotherhood and love that could be heard for miles. By the end of the week, there were over 1,000 bikers parked outside that hospital. The local news showed up. People came out of their homes to see. Signs were raised that read, "Ride for Ethan." The doctors were overwhelmed, not just by the crowd, but by the donations pouring in from bikers and strangers around the world. They paid for his treatments, his future, his education. Every biker in that crowd wore a patch with Ethan's name, and on the day he finally opened his eyes after surgery, the sound of engines roared again, his new family cheering for him. When Ethan looked around the hospital room and saw Hawk smiling through tears, he whispered, "You really came back for me?" Hawk placed his hand on the boy's chest and said, "Kid, we never left." Months passed. Ethan got stronger. He began to walk again, then run, and soon he was back at the biker garage helping out. But something had changed. He was no longer the scared boy hiding under a streetlight. He was part of something bigger, a family that had shown him that even the roughest people could have the kindest hearts. Years later, on the anniversary of the night they found him, Ethan stood in front of a crowd of bikers and community members. The sun set behind him, and he wore the same leather vest Hawk had once given him, now perfectly fitted. His voice shook as he spoke. "I used to think the world forgot about kids like me. But then you showed up. 1,000 engines, 1,000 hearts. You didn't just save me, you gave me a reason to believe again." The crowd erupted in cheers, some wiping away tears behind their sunglasses. He continued, "People look at bikers and see danger, but I saw angels with engines. You all taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you're at your lowest." Hawk, now older and grayer, smiled proudly from the front row. He had lost many things in life, but finding Ethan had given his own existence new meaning. Ethan later dedicated his life to helping other homeless children, starting a foundation called Ride for Hope, built in honor of the bikers who saved him. Every year, the club organized a charity ride that stretched across states, raising money, awareness, and faith in humanity. Reporters covered it, strangers joined in, and the sound of roaring engines became a symbol of redemption and love. But the most touching moment came years later, when Hawk fell ill. The club gathered one last time in the hospital, surrounding his bed just as they once did for Ethan. The boy, now a grown man, took Hawk's hand and said, "You told me I had a family. You were right. Because of you, thousands of kids now do too." Hawk smiled faintly, whispered, "Keep riding, kid," and closed his eyes peacefully. At his funeral, 1,000 bikers rode in silence, engines rumbling like thunder in the distance, a tribute to the man who taught them that the greatest ride of all was the one that led straight to someone's heart. Ethan stood beside the casket, tears in his eyes but a smile on his lips. "You'll always ride with me," he said. Then he started his bike and led the convoy through the sunrise, the wind carrying the echo of a story that began on a rainy night and ended with 1,000 hearts beating as one. So, if this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Help keep stories of compassion and hope alive in a world that so desperately needs them. And before you go, drop a comment below and tell us, what does family mean to you? Because sometimes family isn't what you're born into. It's the people who ride in when everyone else rides away.